Good morning. I'm Harley Schlanger from the LaRouche Organization with your daily video update for September 8th, 2025. I want to begin by talking about a call that was issued by Helga Zepp-LaRouche on behalf of the Schiller Institute in the wake of the conferences in Asia, which created the potential, or I should say consolidated the potential, for a new trading and economic development system, which includes support from virtually the entire global South. Now, the problem is that the people in the western part of the world, the transatlantic region, the United States, United Kingdom, and Europe, are stuck in a paradigm that's 500 years old, the end of the colonial system, the European colonial system. It's come to an end. And the question is, what will replace it? Or how will it end? Will it end horribly, or can we have a transition to a better period of history? Now, what Helga said in her statement, and I'm going to quote it, and it will be linked in the description section for you to take it, produce it, and circulate it. She said, "We can either continue the geopolitical confrontation against Russia and China, making a third and this time final world war, or we can choose to cooperate with this emerging new economic system." Then she went on to say, "It is in the fundamental self-interest of the nations of the collective West, which are no longer truly united, to cooperate with the states of the global majority and to jointly address the great challenges facing humankind: overcoming poverty and underdevelopment, ensuring lasting world peace, and securing the right of every person on this planet to fulfill their potential, their full human potential, and for sovereign nation states to carry out plans which develop themselves as sovereign states as part of an alliance with mutual benefit for their neighbors and trading partners." Now, that's the alternative to the continued zero-sum game of the present world system under the International Monetary Fund, the World Trade Organization, and so on. Now, Helga's statement is reflected in the deliberations that went on in Shanghai, in Tianjin, in Beijing, in Vladivostok, where the Eurasian perspective is coming into focus as an economic development and trading partnership with connectivity, with integration, exactly the kind of advances that enabled the United States in the 19th century with the transcontinental railroad system to become the global economic power by the time of the 20th century. Now, there's an example, just to give you a sense of what's being said in these other countries. The South China Morning Post, which is in Hong Kong, called on the West to, quote, "match the statesmanship that Xi, the president of China, and others are displaying via the Shanghai Cooperation Organization and the BRICS group to bolster and improve upon the existing architecture of multilateral institutions." Instead of having resentment that the global South powers are now leading infrastructure and monetary initiatives, which is true. They're developing, they're advancing at a rapid rate while the West is stagnating and declining. The South China Morning Post goes on to say that the unipolar world of the past cannot be maintained. It is already over. And that's the view of most people in the global South. Those of you who live in the global North, the global West, the transatlantic, whatever you want to call it, probably don't see it that way. You may see patches of collapse, you may see things that trouble you, but you haven't realized yet that a whole era of history has passed. And the ability of the colonial policy to sustain the living standards of the West is no longer there, and can only do that through expanded predatory looting of not only the developing sector, but of the people in the West. And so what the South China Morning Post, and again, listen to the language, it reflects what Helga said. The international monetary system needs to be consciously redesigned rather than being allowed to evolve haphazardly through competing regional initiatives. So that's the issue. Are we going to get to a new financial and economic development system, or are we going to stay in the system today, which is a move toward increasing provocation and war? Now, so where do things stand? And this question of the failure of the West, just look at Europe. You have the coalition of the willing, also known, according to Ray McGovern, as the coalition of the brain dead. What they're saying is you have to keep the war going against Russia in Ukraine. You have to keep the green agenda. You have to spend more money on weapons in preparation for a war with Russia. So what's the result of this? Well, the government of the United Kingdom is falling apart. The deputy prime minister is forced to resign. Starmer, according to Alexander Mercouris, is at about 10% popularity. In France, as you're hearing this update this morning, there's a vote that will probably put an end to the current government of Macron under Bayrou. Bayrou is the prime minister. And then it moves into chaos. What's going to happen? What if they can't put together a new government? Because the last time it took them months. Well, Macron has said he could be willing to rule by decree. This is also known as the Zelensky option. It's not a real option. And it will lead to chaos in France. Then you also have the Brits messing around in the Balkans, the possibility of triggering a new war based on the territory and the arena which brought us World War I and World War II. Now, remember, Donald Trump campaigned to end the wars. Well, here's his chance. And in particular, it means he has to tell Zelensky, accept the security terms presented by the Russians, the legitimate security interests of Russia, as well as Ukraine. Mutual security. But how do you realize that? Economic cooperation. And this is where you can look then at the Middle East and see the same thing. The solution to the crisis in Gaza is not to kill all the Palestinians. It's not to force them to flee or lock them into Bantustans. No, the solution is an economic cooperation policy which raises the standard of living of all people. And this is what the Oasis plan of Lyndon LaRouche was about. Fresh water that will power agriculture, green the deserts, and also produce hydroelectric power. Electricity for the development of all states in the region, Palestinian, Israel, and the Arab neighbors. So these are win-win solutions. This is what was discussed at the Shanghai conference in Tianjin. This is what the BRICS are looking at. This is what the Russians are looking at. And what the Oasis Plan represents is a return to the policies of Hamilton for the United States. And what was Hamilton about? This is something that we'll be talking about a lot more in the days and weeks to come. A Hamiltonian credit policy is when the government commits itself to introduce credit into the financial system to maximize the potential to incorporate new discoveries in science and technology to increase the productivity of labor. That's how you produce wealth. Wealth is the added value that comes from improvements in technology, which cheapens the cost overall of production. A part of that is infrastructure. If you have good infrastructure, it enables you to move goods rapidly, to move the raw materials, to have the power and clean water necessary for the industrial processes and the agricultural processes. That's the Hamiltonian system. a system of national banking which is committed to funding those productive sectors which will produce the greatest return, that will give you the capability to retire the debt you have, but also to invest in the next generation of technology. And that's what LaRouche's 4 laws are all about. So instead of flailing around trying to recapture the glory of a system which has collapsed, that is the colonial neo-feudal system of the last 500 years, instead of hitching your wagon to that, now is the time to work with the global South, for the Western countries to recognize that the future is with the global majority. And that's what the LaRouche movement has been fighting for. So I urge you to look at the links in the description section and to become part of our movement, because we represent the future, not an effort to sustain the injustices of the past.